The BMW XM is the first dedicated motorsport model from BMW since the iconic M1. So it's supposed to be a special halo vehicle to crown its range of very sporty, enthusiast-pleasing vehicles. But is it? In today's video, I'm going to try to find out, but I can already spoil it for you and tell you that no, I don't think it's a fitting successor to the M1. But before we talk about the XM, let me briefly tell you about BMW's history of making dedicated sports cars. It only really has one. That's the M1, which is an Italian-designed and built mid-engine sports car, which did feature a BMW straight six in the middle, but it was assembled in Italy and then it was shipped over to Germany for final inspection. BMW did eventually make a mid-engine sports car, the i8, but that's a hybrid whose aim is to use as little fuel as possible. I mean, for the i8, fun is not a priority. And none of the vehicles in BMW's line of Z-branded models, the Z1, 3, and 4, none of them are true sports cars. Although perhaps the most recent one, the G29, is the closest thing BMW has ever come to producing its own thoroughbred proper sports car, because it rides on a bespoke sports car platform, which that car shares with the Toyota Supra, and it's really good to drive. It has double wishbone suspension, it's a sporty thing, a proper sporty thing, the Z4, even though the Supra is the more fun and better to drive of the two vehicles. The XM was announced and revealed in 2022. We initially thought this vehicle was going to be called the X8. That's what all the automotive websites were calling it when they were posting the spy shots, showing hints of this car's quite unusual looking face, although it's not an unattractive face. And the way it looks isn't my main gripe with this car. In fact, it's kind of grown on me. It drives alright too. It's sharp enough, but it's way too heavy to be sporty. What is the BMW XM? Well, it rides on the CLAR platform that BMW uses to underpin all its rear-wheel drive models, from the 2 Series Coupe all the way to the X7 and everything in between. So you could say the XM is related to all of these models, although it does share some specific components with the X5M. It is longer than an X5M, and this translates into a lot of rear legroom. I really appreciate the fact that for this car, BMW's engineers didn't try to cram in a third row of seats. That would have been at odds with this car's sporty character. And what you get instead is one of the roomiest back seats in any modern SUV, to be honest. It's ridiculously roomy. Even behind myself, I'm 183 centimeters tall, and the seat itself in the back is really comfy. You feel very special in the back of this car, especially if it's configured as nicely as this one is. The car's total length is over 5.1 meters, and it's just over 2 meters wide as well. So it has a big footprint. And given the fact that it's a big SUV with a big battery pack, you would expect it to be heavy, and you would be right. This vehicle weighs around 2.8 tons. Yeah, 2.8 tons. That's around 6,000 pounds, which is quite a lot, especially if you want to call something a sporty car and slap an M badge on it and call it a dedicated M model. Driving the XM with the optional 23-inch wheels that this car has, a 3,000-ish euro option I might add, they do look good, but they make an already stiff and kind of unpleasant riding car even more unpleasant riding. I think the way this car rides over imperfections in the roads is its biggest shortcoming. I know BMW will tell you that it is a stiff and sporty car, so you do have to sacrifice a bit of comfort, but I don't think the trade-off is worth it in this car. I mean, given how luxurious the interior feels, at least this one as spec'd, you would expect it to feel a bit more cushy and plush, over the rough stuff in the road. But it just isn't. The suspension is not only noisy, but it also sends jolts into the cabin. Granted, the side-to-side sway that I really don't like in SUVs isn't as present and as noticeable in the XM. And that's because it has active roll stabilization, active anti-roll bars, which do seem to control side-to-side motion and roll in the vehicle very well. And in fact, depending on which mode you're in, it can even stiffen up the rear anti-roll bar more than the front in order to improve the car's willingness to rotate into a corner. And it really does rotate. I wasn't expecting this, but you can do a few donuts in this car. When I picked this car up from BMW, I was wondering why the rear tires were so worn. But now I know, and I get it. Maneuverability is pretty good for a vehicle riding on a 3.1 meter wheelbase. It is helped by active rear wheel steering, which does make the car feel smaller than it is, but its turning circle diameter is still 12.5 meters, so not amazing. The trunk can take up to 527 liters worth of your stuff, or over 1800 liters if you fold the rear seat flat. So in terms of practicality, a good, honest proposition. If you want to make an XM interior feel special, you need to go for this merino leather, this two-tone finish, which is absolutely gorgeous. It has the vintage brown leather on the dash and on the top of the doors, as well as this, I think it's called deep petrol color on the seats and the lower part of the doors. It's a dark and deep turquoise type color, which goes really well with the green Cape York metallic exterior finish. This car has some standard carbon fiber trim on the center console, on the dash, and I think that's pretty much it. It gets the same 12.3-inch driver's display and the 14.9-inch infotainment display running iDrive 8. Since this is a dedicated M model, it also gets the M-specific shifter, which it doesn't really deserve because the shifts aren't that quick, but we'll get to that in the driving bit. It gets the M steering wheel with the two M buttons and the larger pedals, as well as the M stitching. My Tesla also has this lovely suede headlining, which matches the brown leather. The front seats are heated, cooled, and they can massage you, although the massage function isn't amazing, to be honest. I think the interior does feel special. You get an M badge there next to the passenger's air vent, and there's a little M here in the digital gauge cluster, which you can change, by the way, by pressing on the M mode button here. And you can change the dials. You can change them from road into sport, and sport just eliminates many of the things that you don't need when you're driving this in a sporty fashion, and it just shows you your driving settings. It doesn't get the track setting that some M models get, that eliminates as much of the information as possible and just shows you the real basics of what you need to see when you're on a track. But BMW is perfectly aware that you're not going to take this to a track, so it hasn't bothered including that mode. When you change the dials from road into track, you get a nice rev counter right in front of you on the head-up display, which allows you to see the 7,200 RPM red line approaching. And you actually need to shift a bit before you might think is necessary because the gearbox is quite laggy. Probably the most spectacular part of the interior is the headliner, which gets these angular shapes in it and has very strong mood lighting. Overall, I don't think the interior feels quite as sporty as an X5M's interior, but if you spec it like this one, it feels more luxurious and sportier, I guess. And the fact that this car has heated armrests does suggest to me that it is pitched as a slightly more luxurious rather than sporty offering, even in spite of the fact that it doesn't have air suspension and the ride is a bit jarring. I think BMW wasn't really sure what it wanted to do with this very radical looking car. And speaking of radical looking, I think it's time to talk about the exterior. The front end, I think, has the best rendition of the split headlight design. The daytime running brows are slightly slanted, giving this car an angry insect look from the front. The grille is huge, but we've come to expect that from BMW. And it has a very thick illuminated outline, which I think is a bit much. I don't mind the illumination around the grille, but I think BMW did it much better for the new 5 Series with a much thinner strip of light running all the way around each of the kidney grills. From the side, This gives me the same impression that the iX gave me to a degree. And by that I mean it looks less like an SUV and more like a tall wagon for some reason, or a big hatchback, a big sporty hatchback. I prefer the look of the iX to this, I might add. That has really grown on me. The thing that sets the XM apart from its side is a strip of trim running below the window line. This ornament starts on the front fender where it says XM, and then it goes along the doors, and then it goes up and meets the trim around the windows. I think that's a cool design touch. It's not bad at all. I really like that this car also has very wide and muscular flanks. I also love the rear lights. I think BMW is at the top of its rear light design game these days, excluding the 2 Series Coupe, which could have been better, and I'm sure will be better after they facelift it. And this car just looks special. I mean, you really can't go unnoticed in this car. People will stare at you in this as you drive by, and when they see the back of it and hear the quite raspy exhaust, they will continue looking. The rear end is pretty good. It brings an homage to the M1, which I think is a bit unfortunate with the 2 BMW roundels in the upper corners of the rear glass. I'm not really sure why BMW did that. It's as if it wanted to dilute the M brand with this vehicle. BMW teased that, what was it called? The mid-engined looking concept a few years back. And everybody was expecting the Bavarians to put some form of that vehicle into production. And instead we got this. And to be frank, the electric part of the powertrain doesn't really add anything to the driving experience.
The XM has a 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 under the hood, the same unit that you will find in an X5M. It is detuned slightly in the base XM, so it makes 490 horsepower between 5400 and 7200 RPM and a peak torque of 650 Newton meters between 1600 and 5000 RPM. Together with the electric motor, it has a combined output of over 650 horsepower and 800 Newton meters, which is enough to send the XM from 0 to 100 km per hour in 4.3 seconds and onto an electronically limited top speed of 250 km per hour or 155 miles per hour. The top of the range label red variant boosts the combined power and torque figures to 748 horsepower and 1000 Newton meters of torque. That's 737 pound-feet of mountain-moving pull. And it slashes the sprint time to 3.8 seconds, although the top speed remains the same.
Let's see how much of that was through the speakers. So I'm going to press the exhaust button and try to do a pull again. Let's see. So this is what it sounds like without it. Sure, it sounds V80, but it's not befitting of an M car, I'm sorry to say. One thing I do really like about this car are the XM badges with the gold accenting. They are so cool looking, but this car doesn't deserve such a cool badge. The badge would have been perfectly suitable if BMW had put the M1 homage concept into production, or something that deserves an M badge, because this car does not. It can be an M performance model, which it is, but don't say it's full motorsport, because it isn't. When it comes to the driving dynamics, the first thing that comes to mind is just how much weight this car has and how that feels around the corners. It is as capable as any big and tall BMW is, but it isn't any more capable. It's kind of hard to keep it under control, especially on corner exit, because it seems to get unsettled on its suspension, even though the suspension is in its sportiest setting, and the active anti-roll bars are also turned all the way up. The back does let go very easily, but it's really not that pleasant to play with it, to be honest. I mean, an X5M feels more controlled than this, even though it's about as tall. It is a sporty driving experience, but it's not an M driving experience. So I think this car has a bit of a muddled identity. It has an M engine, but it's weighed down by hundreds and hundreds of kilos of unnecessary electric powertrain. It's one of those vehicles that seems to be the result of a committee where many people had many ideas and they wanted to include all of them in a single vehicle. It has to be an SUV. It has to be an M1 homage. It has to be an M car, a proper M car. It has to be a luxury car. It needs to justify costing over 150,000 euros. And I don't think it achieves any of those to the extent that BMW wanted.
And it's not an especially good plug-in hybrid either. PHEVs are supposed to be efficient, right? When it comes to the XM's claimed efficiency, BMW says that it should use no more than 1.7 liters per 100 kilometers. But that seems highly unlikely given the kind of car that this is and how people are expected to be driving it.
BMW does say this is the most unapologetically styled vehicle in its current lineup. And it is. But if only the powertrain was a bit better or a bit sportier. And if it was a bit lower on its suspension with a bit less range of movement so that you felt more in control, maybe it would have deserved the badge and it would have been a better received sporty SUV offering from BMW. As it stands though, I think it's weighed down by its heavy electrified powertrain. I mean, why does it need it? Why does it need such a huge battery pack in order to achieve just 650 horsepower combined from the internal combustion engine and electric motor? I mean, BMW can easily and safely extract over 600 horsepower from the 4.4 liter twin turbo S68.
The PHEV system adds around 250 kilograms or over 500 pounds of extra weight, which is the enemy of everything that is holy to driving enthusiasts. The electric motor makes almost 200 horsepower and 280 newton meters, that's 206 pound-feet, and it can propel the XM from a standstill to 100 kilometers per hour in just over 10 seconds, which is reasonably brisk. And it will stay in electric mode up to speeds of 140 kph or 87 mph. The XM carries around a 29.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack with a usable capacity of 25.7 kilowatt-hours. This gives a WLTP electric-only range of up to 88 kilometers. Charging the XM isn't so great. Unlike other top-tier PHEVs with big batteries that nowadays offer DC fast charging, this flagship performance PHEV from BMW will only charge at 7.4 kilowatts, so you will have to wait around for almost 4.5 hours for the battery to go from flat to full.
This powertrain is going to make its way into the next M5, which will be a few hundred kilos lighter than this and lower and sportier and stiffer and better in every single way from a driver's perspective. Yet I can't help but feel that the electrification is robbing these cars of their sportiness. And the gearbox does that too, because as I've said, you have this M-specific shifter which gives you this rocker button that you can control the severity of the gear shifts with. And yet, if you put it in its most brutal setting, I don't think it feels as it should. This has the same 8-speed transmission that BMW has in all its models, but it doesn't feel that great or that sporty. There's even a delay between the shifts. You know what I did there? I shifted when I thought it was the right moment to do so, but because of the lag that this transmission has when you pull the paddles, it hit the red line. Upshifting just lurches you forward. And I've not experienced this in any other BMW with this transmission, so I assume it comes courtesy of the electrification. The gearbox really brings this car down. The brakes are sharp, although you will surely overheat them if you try to drive this down a twisty mountain road, but they work fine. I can see that in my experience, they stop the car better than you would expect. I've driven other big BMWs where the brakes have felt less adequate than these, so good job. The steering is also sharp, but not overly sharp. By the way, these modes are completely unfathomable. You have the two M modes, then you have M hybrid, which is somehow different. I mean, I'm in hybrid now, but if I put it into electric, it goes into electric, and if I put it into e-control, it's supposed to hold the charge. Oh, by the way, BMW offers fewer settings than ever before to allow you to control the state of charge of the battery. So there's no longer a save mode that would allow you to charge your battery on the way and then drive fully electrically once you got there. Because the Bavarians now believe that you should charge this car regularly in order to take full advantage of its efficiency. Which you should, but it does take a while to charge because the battery pack is as big as in a first generation Nissan Leaf, and unless you can plug it in your garage or something, it's not really practical to go out into town, find a public charger to put juice back into this car's battery. So I'm not really sure what the thinking is behind this. Let me put the dials back into the road setting so I can check the efficiency. So today, I've driven about 50-70 kilometers, mostly out on open roads, and the car has been averaging 18.3 liters per 100 kilometers and an average electricity consumption of over 35 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And that's quite far off BMW's claim. It almost makes me laugh. This car can use 1.5 liters per 100 kilometers, which of course is fully achievable, but you wouldn't really be deriving any enjoyment out of driving the car. Whenever I've started this car up, I've always put it in one of the two preset M modes so that the V8 wakes up. And sure, you might argue with me that since this is a plug-in hybrid, that's not what you should be doing. But I disagree with you. I would tell you that this is a proper M model, and that's exactly what you should do. I don't see the point of the electrification part of this powertrain, because for most people it won't offer any significant efficiency gains. It weighs down the car, and weight is the enemy of literally everything. And by that I mean acceleration, handling, braking, and even efficiency. Because instead of relying on an overly complicated plug-in hybrid system to make a vehicle efficient, why not just try to make it as light as possible, still have the V8 in it, and I assure you that the efficiency will be comparable to this, yet the resulting vehicle will be much better. I know BMW is pressed by various governing bodies to lower the CO2 emissions of its entire range, and given that on paper the XM uses 1.5 liters per 100 kilometers, that probably looks good for BMW. But in the real world, it doesn't really perform, driving it as it was intended in order to get the claimed efficiency out of it. And that just defeats the fun, especially since I need to pull over for this to tell you the price. Because this car, with VAT and none of the options, is 170,000 euros. And with the options, the car that I'm driving today, 187,000 euros. The feeling and the experience that it offers you is inferior to that of an X5M, if what you're looking for is a sporty BMW SUV. The car has seen some sales success, apparently. I mean, even in Romania, BMW has sold over 50 of these. But it's hard to justify the price when the X5M is cheaper. I think BMW wanted to pitch this as an electrified rival to the Lambo Urus, but it's nowhere near as exciting as that. So I'm not sure in the long run if it will prove to be a popular choice among BMW's SUV buyers.